Everyone's heard the name Suge Knight, but not everyone knows the real reason people feared him. In the 1990s, Suge didn't just run Death Row Records. He ran it like a warlord.
I think the guy is a serious major gangster. I have guns all around this house. You know, this art form isn't worth me and my family getting killed over.
A handshake with Suge could make you rich. A disagreement, that could get you stripped, pistol whipped, or worse. From dangling rappers off balconies to sending pitbulls into business meetings, Suge built an empire on intimidation and left a trail of silence, blood, and lawsuits behind him. This isn't about hit records. It's about raw power, the kind that made grown men tremble, even in boardrooms. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on Suge Knight's reign of terror, a string of shocking, sometimes unbelievable stories from people who lived to tell them. Let's start at the top, 14 floors up to be exact. The Balcony Incident, 1990 Beverly Hills. Before Death Row Records became the most feared label in music, before the platinum plaques and courtroom chaos, there was a balcony and a pop star who got too close to the edge. In 1990, Robert Van Winkle, better known as Vanilla Ice, was on top of the world. His breakout single, Ice Ice Baby, had just made him the first rapper to reach #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. But behind the scenes, another man believed he deserved a cut of that success. That man was Suge Knight. At the time, Suge was still operating in the shadows of the music business. Not yet the kingpin of West Coast rap, but already building his empire, one confrontation at a time. According to Vanilla Ice, Suge showed up with a small entourage and demanded a conversation about unpaid royalties. He didn't come with a lawyer, he came with intimidation. The two met at the luxurious Bel Age Hotel in Beverly Hills.
First time I met Suge Knight was at a restaurant in LA called Palm Restaurant. And I was sitting there eating, nice meal, and all of a sudden these huge guys, who looked like a football team, showed up.
Vanilla says Suge brought him up to a high-floor suite, took him out to the balcony, and made him look down. Vanilla has gone back and forth over the years, sometimes saying Suge never physically touched him, other times describing a quiet threat that felt worse than violence.
You scared? I needed to wear a diaper on that day. I was very scared.
One thing he never denied, the fear was real, and it worked. By the end of that meeting, Vanilla Ice signed over a percentage of the publishing rights to Ice Ice Baby. Suge walked away with a chunk of the song's fortune and a reputation that would only grow darker from there. It wasn't the last time he used psychological warfare to get what he wanted, but it was the moment that made the industry realize Suge Knight wasn't just another hungry manager, he was a problem, and people were about to find out just how far he'd go. Bats and Betrayal, 1991, Los Angeles. A year after the Vanilla Ice shakedown, Suge Knight set his sights on something even bigger than royalty checks, Dr. Dre. At the time, Dre was still locked into a contract with Ruthless Records, the label co-founded by NWA frontman Eazy-E. Dre wanted out, but Eazy wasn't letting go. That's when Suge showed up, not with a proposal, but with baseball bats and lead pipes. According to NWA's former manager Jerry Heller, Suge orchestrated a straight-up ambush. He and several associates allegedly cornered Eazy at a hotel or studio, accounts vary, and laid it out plainly. If he didn't release Dr. Dre from his contract, there would be consequences. Not legal, physical.
So Suge Knight was his guy, and he brought Suge Knight around. And Suge Knight to me marked the end of fun in hip-hop. Before that, it was fun. We all had fun, man.
Yeah.
After Suge Knight got involved, there was no more fun. There were guys sitting in our office with Uzis 24 hours a day.
Heller claimed Eazy was so enraged by the stunt that he seriously considered retaliation. But in the end, he chose restraint. Whether it was fear, strategy, or both, Eazy let Dre go. And just like that, Suge had secured the future co-founder of Death Row Records. This wasn't just a power move, it was a hostile takeover. Suge had rewritten the rules of the music business. If you wanted an artist, you didn't need to outbid the competition. You just needed to out-threaten them. It sent a message across the industry. Suge wasn't bluffing. He didn't sue you. He showed up in person. And when he did, contracts got shredded, alliances collapsed, and silence followed. Everyone knew what happened, but no one dared to speak out loud. Behind the scenes, executives started using coded language. Don't cross that guy. He's unpredictable. watch your back. And they weren't talking about artists. They were talking about Suge. What started with balcony threats had now escalated to baseball bats and broken loyalty. And the deeper Suge got into the industry, the more unshakable his grip became. But some people weren't just scared, they were scarred, literally. The studio beatdown, 1992 Los Angeles. By 1992, Suge Knight had built a name for himself that carried more weight than most major labels. But his empire wasn't run from conference rooms. It was ruled through fear, violence, and humiliation. And sometimes the victims weren't rivals or competitors. They were nobodies, unknown kids just trying to get a foot in the door. That year, two young aspiring rappers, George and Linwood Stanley, found themselves at Death Row's Los Angeles studio. They weren't signed, they weren't famous. They used the studio's phone without asking. What happened next became one of the most brutal and least talked about stories in Death Row lore. Suge's crew reportedly dragged the two brothers into a back room and forced them at gunpoint to strip naked. Then, according to court documents and multiple insider accounts, they pistol-whipped them until their faces were bloodied. One witness even claimed a gun was fired during the assault. Not to kill, but to terrify. The message was clear: nobody disrespects Suge, not even by picking up the wrong phone. The Stanleys later filed a lawsuit, but like many cases tied to Suge and Death Row, it quietly disappeared. No major headlines, no lasting consequences, just silence and scars. It wasn't just the violence that shocked insiders, it was the randomness of it. These weren't high-profile beefs, these weren't million-dollar artists. This was Suge asserting dominance simply because he could. A momentary decision, a flash of rage, and two young men were left traumatized and humiliated. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern, one that didn't stop at rivals but extended to anyone in Suge's orbit. Rappers, assistants, security guards, even fans knew that one wrong move could lead to fists, guns, or worse. Death Row wasn't just a label, it was a kingdom ruled by intimidation. And the king never slept. If you thought that was bad, just wait, because the next story involves something even more disturbing, and a champagne flute filled with something no one should ever drink. The Urine Cup, 1998, Los Angeles. By the late 90s, Suge Knight's reputation had evolved from dangerous to downright sadistic. After years of industry bullying and behind-the-scenes threats, the stories were no longer just about violence, they were about humiliation. And one of the most disturbing tales came from deep inside Hollywood's event circuit, where a music promoter made the mistake of saying no. The story, reported in Ronan Rowe's book, Have Gun Will Travel, and whispered in industry corners for years, starts with a simple disagreement. A well-connected promoter allegedly failed to deliver information Suge wanted, possibly related to rival mogul Puff Daddy. That alone was enough to set things off. Instead of confronting him at a table or picking up the phone, Suge's people allegedly dragged the man into a private room. There, witnesses say he was beaten with champagne bottles, then held down and forced to drink a flute filled with Suge's urine. Let that sink in. This wasn't just about pain, it was about control, about erasing someone's dignity so thoroughly they wouldn't dare open their mouth again. The story sounds unbelievable, but those close to Death Row at the time insist it fits a pattern. Suge didn't just want to win disputes. He wanted people broken, inside and out. It was psychological warfare, taken to grotesque extremes, and yet nobody reported it to the police. Nobody pressed charges, because nobody wanted to be next. People in the industry started avoiding Suge altogether. Promoters pulled out of deals. Producers refused to pick up calls. Even artists who once idolized the Death Row name began steering clear. This wasn't just fear, it was revulsion. A realization that Suge had crossed into something darker than business. He didn't just want respect, he wanted obedience. Total, unshakable, terrified submission. And if you thought this was the low point, it wasn't. Because a year later, Suge would find himself back at the center of a storm. This time in the passenger seat of a car that was about to drive hip-hop off a cliff. The Final Ride, 1996, Las Vegas. September 7th, 1996, Las Vegas. A night packed with glitz, blood, and the final chapter of a friendship built on loyalty and fear. Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur weren't just business partners anymore. They moved like royalty. Tupac had become Death Row's crown jewel, and Suge treated him like a brother. He gave Pac cars, jewelry, a mansion in Calabasas. He paid legal fees, covered family expenses, and made him the face of the label. On the surface, it looked like loyalty. But behind the scenes, some insiders say it looked more like ownership. That night, the two were in Vegas to watch Mike Tyson knock out Bruce Seldon in just 109 seconds. Cameras flashed as Tupac, draped in Versace, strutted through the MGM Grand with Suge close behind. But just after the fight, they crossed paths with Orlando Anderson, a Southside Crip, and chaos erupted. Security footage captured Tupac throwing the first punch, launching a vicious group beatdown right there in the lobby. Anderson would later be named a suspect in Tupac's murder, but no one was ever charged. Later that night, as they cruised down Flamingo Road in a black BMW, a white Cadillac pulled up beside them. Gunfire erupted. Tupac was hit 4 times. Suge, despite being just inches away, was only grazed by shrapnel. He kept driving until police pulled them over and called for an ambulance. For 6 days, Tupac clung to life in a hospital bed. The world watched, fans prayed, and Suge stayed mostly silent.
Right after I heard Tupac got shot, I immediately flew to Vegas, and I walked in the room and I seen him laid out on the bed with all kind of tubes and shit in him, and I was so weak I damn near fell over. And his mom came over to me and she grabbed me. She held me up and she said, "Baby, you got to be strong."
On September 13th, Tupac died. He was 25.
Tupac loved Death Row. Tupac loved me, I loved him. I mean, Tupac took Death Row to the next level.
To this day, conspiracy theories swirl. Some say it was gang retaliation. Others believe Tupac was trying to leave Death Row, and Suge couldn't let that happen. No matter which story you believe, one thing is certain. The man who bailed Tupac out of prison was in the car when his story ended. And after that night, nothing in hip-hop would ever be the same. Whispers of Slow Death, 2003 Los Angeles. If violence was Suge Knight's signature, paranoia was his shadow. And in the years after Tupac's death, the rumors surrounding him got darker. The fists were still flying, but the whispers, they started to sound like murder plots. In 2003, Suge appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live, wearing sunglasses and a grin. The audience laughed, but then he said something that wiped the smile off everyone's face. Suge joked about how they don't always shoot people to kill them fast. Sometimes, he said, they use something worse, a syringe, blood, something that kills slow, like AIDS. It sounded like a sick punchline, but the reference wasn't random. Suge was talking about Eazy-E. The crowd laughed nervously.
Right. So they got this new thing out there. People sell them all the time. They got this stuff they get blood from somebody with AIDS, and then they shoot you with it.
Oh,
so
well, that seems bad.
That's a slow death.
Yeah.
An Eazy-E thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, no. Okay.
Kimmel was clearly caught off guard, but the damage was done. To this day, people debate whether Suge was making a joke, a confession, or a threat disguised as comedy. What's more disturbing is how well the theory fit into the myth that surrounded him. By 2003, Suge wasn't just feared for what he'd done, but for what people believed he was capable of doing. That same year, former LAPD detective Greg Kading launched an investigation into the murder of notorious B.I.G. His findings? He believed that Suge, operating from behind bars, had orchestrated Biggie's murder as retaliation for Tupac's death. According to Kading, the hit was carried out by a Bloods gang member named Wardell Poochie Faust. Faust was later killed in Compton. The case remains unsolved. Whether any of it is true hardly matters. The legend was alive. The suggestion that Suge might have weaponized a disease or sent a hitman from a jail cell only added to the fear. It was no longer just about what Suge had done. It was about what people believed he could do. And that belief, true or not, was often enough to keep mouths shut and doors closed. But as terrifying as those rumors were, they weren't the most bizarre stories tied to Suge's name. Some, believe it or not, involved pitbulls and grown men hung upside down, dogs, chains, and urban legends. By the mid-2000s, Suge Knight had already crossed the line between man and myth. His name didn't just spark fear, it inspired stories. Tales so wild, so absurd that people didn't know whether to believe them or be afraid they were true. One of the most infamous? That Suge once sent a pack of pitbulls charging into a record label meeting. The details shift depending on who tells it. Some say it was a rival executive's office. Others claim it happened during a licensing dispute. But the core remains the same. Suge didn't raise his voice. He raised animals. Then there's the legend of the upside-down deal. Multiple sources over the years, some anonymous, some not, have claimed that Suge once hung an artist upside down by their ankles in a high-rise suite during a contract dispute. The story sounds like a cartoon gangster sketch, but the industry never laughed. And this wasn't just about rival execs or tough guys. These rumors filtered into studios, tour buses, and green rooms. Young artists, producers, even bodyguards traded these tales like ghost stories. Don't answer the call, they'd say. Don't pick up the phone if it's Suge. Some stories, like the Vanilla Ice balcony incident, have partial confirmations. Others are just fragments of hearsay passed around by people who swear they heard it from someone who was there. But the result is the same, a mythology of menace.
Your moms and Suge Knight's moms
stay across the street from each other.
Stay across the street from each other?
My mom stayed across the street from his mom. I used to see him all the time. But Suge pulled me over one time with probably about 30 niggas.
Right.
And he just made me assure that even though niggas was beefing and niggas was rolling around Compton looking for each other or going through neighborhoods and all that shit, he assured that my mom's house wouldn't get fucked with.
It's strange. This man who allegedly beat people with champagne bottles and sick dogs on enemies also protected the mother of someone he barely knew. That contradiction is what made Suge so terrifying. You didn't know which version of him would show up. One minute he's handing out contracts. The next he's flipping tables and calling in muscle. Some of it was myth. Some of it was memory, but all of it kept people quiet. And yet Suge's reach didn't stop at Los Angeles. His next target, a white rapper from Detroit who was just beginning to make history. The Eminem incident, 2001, Los Angeles and Hawaii. By the early 2000s, Suge Knight wasn't the industry's king anymore, but he was still its boogeyman. Death Row had crumbled, Tupac was gone, Dr. Dre had moved on, and yet Suge's name still made people flinch. And in 2001, that fear was aimed squarely at hip-hop's fastest rising star, Eminem. It started with tension bubbling beneath the surface. Suge hated that Dre had built another empire, this time with aftermath. And Eminem, Dre's new golden child, was its most visible face. Suge may have lost the throne, but he still had soldiers, and he wasn't afraid to remind the world. The first flashpoint came during the filming of 50 Cent's In Da Club music video, a moment that should have been a celebration. Instead, it nearly turned into a street brawl. Tony Yayo was on set that day and says everything shifted when Suge's crew walked in.
So we go back to the mansion, all you see on the news, Young Buck attempted murder. Buck said, I ain't do that shit, man. I was like, see how quick the change? But Buck, you stabbed him with a fork. He got stabbed in the chest and all that, but it was a wild night, bro.
According to G-Unit members, Eminem didn't flinch. But Dre, security, everyone else, they knew this wasn't just a stunt. It was a warning. Suge still had eyes, reach, and no hesitation. But it didn't stop there. Later that year, Eminem flew to Hawaii to shoot a video with Dr. Dre. It should have been safe, isolated, professional, but even across the Pacific, Suge's presence loomed. According to Eminem's former bodyguard, Big Naz, a group of men in red, identified as possible Death Row affiliates, showed up on set. Security scrambled. Local police were brought in. Bulletproof vests were handed out. There was no violence, but no one forgot the message. This was Suge Knight in exile, still casting a shadow across the new generation. He didn't need a label anymore, just his name. And while Eminem walked away that day, not everyone was so lucky, because Suge had one final vendetta to settle with the last superstar who once called him family. Snoop's escape plan, 1997 to 1998, Los Angeles and Compton. After Tupac's death, Death Row Records didn't collapse overnight. It rotted from the inside. Dr. Dre had already walked away. Tupac was gone. And the last megastar still tied to the label, Snoop Dogg. At first, it seemed like Snoop might become Suge Knight's new franchise player. But Snoop wasn't just mourning a friend. He was watching his label morph into something darker. Rumors swirled about money disappearing, projects being shelved, security tightening. Suge had begun to isolate himself, and paranoia was in the air. Then Snoop did something bold. He recorded an album called Fuck Death Row, a full-blown diss project, direct shots at the very man who once helped turn him into a star. It was more than a protest. It was a declaration of war. Snoop's close circle warned him not to release it. And according to multiple accounts, including Snoop himself, Suge caught wind of the album and promised consequences, not legal ones, life-ending ones. The threat was serious enough to scare Snoop into doing something drastic. He reached out to Master P. At the time, Master P was running No Limit Records and had built a reputation for business savvy and muscle. Snoop met with him while Suge was behind bars and worked out a quiet deal. Master P would buy out Snoop's contract, but he had one condition: don't release that album. Snoop agreed. The Effin' Death Row project was buried, and in 1998, Snoop walked away from the label that had nearly cost him his life. He later said, point blank, "Master P saved my life." Snoop had seen what happened to Tupac. He wasn't going to be next. It was a rare escape, one of the few, and it proved that even after everything fell apart, Suge Knight's reach still made grown men choose survival over revenge. But if Snoop got away, how many others never did? Fear made flesh. Suge Knight never needed a hit single to stay relevant. His power came from fear, real, visceral fear. He didn't just run a label, he ran a system where a phone call could clear a room, where silence was more valuable than loyalty, and where violence wasn't the last resort. It was the opening move. He pistol-whipped nobodies, humiliated rivals, terrified legends. From balconies in Beverly Hills to pit bulls in boardrooms, Suge turned intimidation into infrastructure. You couldn't work around him. You either joined him or you braced for impact. Some of the stories you've heard in this video were confirmed in court documents. Others were whispered in studio hallways and green rooms, traded like horror stories. But whether fact or folklore, they all speak to the same truth. Suge Knight didn't just control artists, he controlled narratives. He made the industry scared to speak. And maybe that's the most twisted part. Even now, with Suge behind bars serving a 28-year sentence for manslaughter, his name still sends chills. Not because of what he might do today, but because of what he's already done. So we're left with questions. How many careers were ended behind closed doors? How many voices stayed quiet because of what they saw? How many deals were signed under threat, not choice? This wasn't just music history. It was a reign of terror that reshaped an entire genre. And now it's your turn. Which story hit the hardest? Which one do you think was real and which was too wild to believe? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if it pulled back the curtain on something you've never heard before. And don't forget to subscribe, because we've got more true stories coming. Stories that live between the headlines and the hush. Because sometimes the scariest part of hip-hop history isn't the music, it's the man behind the door.